When we talk about music, what we're actually doing is very often using a bunch of familiar metaphors borrowed from other modes of physical experience. And one of the metaphors I've leaned on a lot in my videos is the idea that rhythms can be slippery.
Pretty cool and pretty slippery.
A rhythmic slip and slide. But this has still a little slippery because things can get hopelessly slippery really quickly. Even slippery guitar chord pattern. It's not like this is ever true in a literal physical sense, of course. So what the heck do I mean by this? I'll try to start answering this question in this short video, which will also be another long-awaited metal adjacent riff analysis about the first riff from my favorite of Omar Rodriguez Lopez's side projects, which is called Solar Gambling. So this riff is not super complicated by the standards of some of the music I've talked about on this channel. The whole pattern looks like this. So there's one ascending thing, then the ascending thing with a second ascending thing tacked on immediately, and then the original version of that ascending thing again. And this repeats through the entire song. There are a few things that can contribute to slipperiness, but the thing that really stands out in this riff is how self-similar it is. It's all based on one ascending idea with only a small alteration. Not only that, but the ending cell is exactly the same as the beginning cell. There's nothing intrinsic to hearing this that tells you whether it's the end of the pattern or the beginning. You have to keep track of the pattern the whole time, and it's really easy to get lost if your attention lapses for a second. This is the crux of this slipperiness here, and even though it's a relatively simple example, I can't resist going into some unnecessary detail. In fancy music theory terms, this reminds me of what Stephen Rings calls a change of qualia, which is this thing that can happen where some objective dimension of the music stays the same, but its meaning changes. A cool example of this with regard to pitch happens at the end of the bridge of the jazz standard All the Things You Are, where this one pitch in the melody is at first a G sharp and an E major 7 chord. Then the chord shifts underneath so that it becomes the sharp 5 in a C 7 sharp 5 or C augmented chord. Then the same pitch becomes an A flat, so the third of an F minor 7 chord. The idea of this subjective quality of a sound object, in this case a single pitch in the melody, changing while the sound object itself doesn't, is kind of what's so cool about this riff. In Locomocion Capilar, we get the same ascending run a million times, but half of them have the quality of phrase opening, and the other half have the quality of phrase closing, even though there's nothing sonically different about what notes or rhythms are being played. So that's one way of thinking about slipperiness in this riff. Another kind of different way is to think of it as an example of a riff that seems to start in the middle. Olivia Lucas wrote about this phenomenon with a bunch of great examples from Obzen in a way that goes into a lot more detail. But the gist is that, in my opinion, this riff would sound a lot more intuitive if we reshuffled the components so that the extended ascending thing comes at the end of the phrase, like this. The mechanics of this, according to Lucas's argument and a lot of cognitive research in linguistics and music, is that English speakers tend to parse things as having the longest thing in a sequence at the end. This would also make this riff resemble a typical sentence type structure, which is another familiar kind of phrase structure in a lot of music. So the fact that this riff isn't arranged in this intuitive way also means that it's harder to grasp than it could be. But if you do slip into hearing it in this intuitive way, you're going to be thrown off by all the texture changes, like when the vocals enter, when the guitar solo enters, all of that stuff. That happens after every 4 measures of 4/4 counting from the beginning. Whereas if you try and hear it in the intuitive way, you're going to be a measure early. So yeah, I would definitely say that this is a rhythmically slippery riff. But again, what does that actually mean? It's not like rhythms are physical objects that can actually have different amounts of friction that we try to pick up and move around, but they fall out of our fingers. But it's also not like that. One of the big developments in understanding music perception during the last 20 years or so has been to dig into the implications of embodied cognition, which is a loosely connected field that explores how our bodies and the physical world shape the ways our brains work in fundamental and surprising ways. One of those is through metaphors based in tactile experiences, which is especially true in music because we have so little vocabulary for describing sound itself. This is a huge and rich topic that I'm not really getting into in this video, but I think that the experience of being able to wrap your head around a riff is often described as being able to grasp it, which is compounded by the idea that being able to play a riff on guitar or drums or bass involves physical motions that are very literally similar to grabbing something. And it follows that a riff that is tricky to learn to play or that's easy to get lost in will be something that resists grabbing, something slippery. Or maybe it's not something you're grabbing, but something you're trying to stand on. You keep thinking you know where you are, but then your feet slip out from under you. And you're all disoriented. Or maybe in this riff, you tune in somewhere in the song and hear that ascending idea and think it's the beginning of the phrase, but it's actually the end of the phrase, and it's like you grabbed something from the wrong end and didn't realize it. Hopefully that's enough metaphors to tide you over for the time being. I will catch you on the slip side. See ya.